Well, hi there. Welcome to the Sovereign CEO podcast. And I am Caleb Jones, and this is Sovereign CEO. And I teach people just like you how to create location-independent businesses, move to a less bad country, or at least set up an international backup plan, and do all these things for very little money. And today we're going to talk about a topic that many of you have asked me about, and that is how to get work done logistically when you are abroad for a long period of time. So what I'm talking here is not about, you go to Vegas for the weekend, or you go to, Hawaii for a few days, or you go to Estonia for a week. I'm not even talking about a week. I'm talking about you go somewhere for a long time. Right now, as this recording, and if you were watching the video version of this podcast, you can see behind me, I am in a very bleak office. It's a very big office. It's kind of nice, but it's very bleak. There's nothing here. I'm renting this office while I'm here in the United States, and I am visiting the United States because I don't live in the United States anymore, thank God. But I'm visiting the United States for 2.5 months. So when you go somewhere for 2.5 months, you have to, or it's like, I think it's, is it 2.5 months? Let me think about it. It's 80 days. So, 2.5 months or so. So when you go somewhere for that long, you got to figure out how do you get your work done, especially if you travel with somebody. Now, if you're not traveling with someone, it's easier. But certainly if you're traveling with someone, you have to figure out those logistics as well. And, the common solution to this is, just go use a co-working space or something like that. And that's fine. I'll cover that as one of the options. But, and as usual with these podcasts, I'm kind of speaking extemporaneously. I have kind of an outline in my head, but I may be meandering on this. The logistics you have to determine when you go somewhere for a long, long time are very different than if you go somewhere for a week or less. Because those you can kind of figure out. You can just kind of work in your hotel room or something. Not a big deal. Matter of fact, let's cover that as option one. Option one is you just work in your hotel room. Now, here are the logistics you need to be aware of when you do this. When I say hotel room, you can also substitute Airbnb or something like that. It doesn't really matter. Airbnb, hotel room doesn't really matter. The point is working in that office or working in that home, that environment. You have to be aware of several things. Number one is, do you have a good desk and a good chair? I have been in Airbnbs all over the world. I have been in fancy and not so fancy hotels all over the world. And I mean fancy and not so fancy. I have stayed in the gamut. I have stayed in the worst shithole hotels. You can't believe it. I have stayed in hotel rooms that were as big as a closet. Several visits to Japan, China, Hong Kong. I've stayed in hotel rooms that were literally the size of a large closet in the United States, where the bed took up the entire room and you have to inch around the bed. I've stayed in those hotels. I've also stayed in, 5-star hotels, very expensive hotels that were like $2,000 a night, that were gigantic and beautiful. I've stayed in the entire gamut. And in both scenarios, I've been very surprised that there weren't places to actually work. I have been in nice hotels that didn't really have a good desk or a good chair for working in. It had maybe a chair for maybe sitting and eating in, or a place to watch TV from the couch. But the working conditions were not very good. And so I don't know about you, but I'm not going to spend, if I'm going to go somewhere for 6 weeks or a month or 3 weeks or what have you, I'm not working on a shitty desk on a shitty chair. Number one, you won't be productive. You just won't. You won't be as productive sitting in an ergonomically disfavorable environment like that. Number two, if you're a pussy, and a lot of you are, unfortunately, your back's going to start to hurt, your leg's going to start to hurt, your butt's going to start to hurt. I don't have those kind of problems, but I know a lot of guys do. I can work in a very uncomfortable chair and a comfortable desk and be fine. But apparently, for some reason, a lot of guys are wimps and their backs hurt or my wrists hurt. So if that's you, if that's the kind of problems you have, then you need to be aware of these things before you get that hotel room or Airbnb. So whenever I rent an Airbnb or a hotel room, I will make sure that I physically see a picture of the desk area, and what chairs are available in that area. And sometimes you're looking for hotels, they don't show that, or they don't show it very well. Guess what? I'll pass in the hotel. Even if it's a really cool hotel and with a really cool location or a cool brand name hotel or what have you, I will pass on it if I can't see with my own eyes, okay, that's a good desk, that's a good chair. I can work at that desk for weeks and be okay and be productive. Same thing with Airbnbs. At Airbnbs, you are going to get the pictures of everything in most Airbnbs. But many Airbnbs have like a dining room table with like dining room chairs or stupid little plastic chairs. Now, for a week, I'll do it. Okay, but for more than a week, which is what we're talking about here in this podcast, I ain't doing that. Sorry, I'm not gonna be productive. I'm just not. Not gonna be productive, not gonna be comfortable. I like to be comfortable and productive when I work. So that means either I'm gonna pass on that or I'm gonna choose one of the other options that I'm gonna discuss in a second. But I'm just saying, this is important for you as a location-dependent entrepreneur to be aware of the working conditions of wherever you go. Don't just get an Airbnb because it looks cool. Don't just get a hotel room because it's a cool brand name. Don't just get an Airbnb because it's in a really cool location right by the clubs and bars that you like. Don't do that. You're gonna need to work while you're there if you're gonna stay for several weeks, right? Right, now if you're retired or you're financially independent, where you make all the money in the world from your investments, you don't need to put any work, then do whatever you want. But if you're actually working like I do, if you're a worker like me, you need to pay attention to these things and prioritize these things. Now, you have another option, which costs more money, and some of you have more money than others, so you can determine this based on your budget. You can go ahead and stay in any hotel room you want, any Airbnb you want, and not give a shit about the working conditions if you choose to work somewhere else. So where would you work? Where would you go work if you were going to stay somewhere for several weeks? Well, option one is a co-working space. There's lots of those all over the world, lots of different brand names. The biggest one in terms of international recognition is a place called Regus, which is a place I've used many times. And that's good if you have a shitty hotel room or a shitty Airbnb or a nice but really small hotel room where they can't even fit a desk in there. You can have open co-working location areas in a Regus. You can actually rent your own office. We'll cover that in a second. But that is certainly an option if you are living in a place that is very cheap. Now, in the cheaper parts of the world, these places are very inexpensive. In Mexico, you can do a co-location work where you get access to an open work area for like $7 to $10 US a day. I mean, it's amazing. It's great. So that's perfectly viable. And a lot of people prefer those work environments because some people are more productive when they hear the background noise of other people working. This concept where you're more productive if you work in a coffee shop and you can hear background noise. Some guys put coffee shop background noise in their computers. Some guys work more productively in environments like this. You may be the opposite. You may be more productive when you are listening to music on your headphones, which means that a co-location service is viable. Get some really good headphones. I have those really good Bose, what are they called? I don't have them here in my office. I can show you. They're like $300. Those fancy, it's the standard Bose headphones. They're amazing. Noise canceling headphones. I just put those on. I'm in another world. And what I do is I play music without any lyrics. That is not too hard. I'll turn it down lower. But that plus the noise canceling works out really well. Or I will play white noise, which is just shh. And it just goes on forever. And I'll just turn that down. That works too, especially if you're in a really, really loud area like an airport or something like that. But that's certainly an option. Or if you are very particular about how you work, and you're very sensitive to these things, or you don't want to wear headphones, or you have the money to do this, you make a little more income, you can get your own office. Let's talk about that. So you have several options in terms of getting your own office. One is you can use a service, a co-location service or co-working space service like Regus, okay? And they will rent offices to you on an hourly basis or a daily basis. Weekly basis, monthly basis, you can kind of negotiate whatever you want. And again, in cheaper countries, this is less expensive. In Western countries, this is ridiculously expensive. For example, and I've done this, you get a really nice office in the nicest part of Mexico, Guadalajara, Mexico, Andares, for like $25 US a week. If you got the same office in the United States or Western Europe, it would be, and I'm literal now, I'm not kidding, it would be $25 an hour. Yes, so hundreds of dollars per day unless you commit to a monthly lease, which you're probably not going to do. So the prices for these things can vary wildly. Another thing you can do is instead of using these more expensive services, you can go on whatever websites apply to that country, and every country has a different set of websites, on renting offices. And these are the websites where anyone who owns office space or a subleasing office space can put a little ad in there, kind of like Craigslist, and you can just kind of poke through and find a place where you can rent an office for someone who has some vacancies or someone who has an office that's too big and they're trying to sublet a piece of their office or sublet a desk or something like that. You can do that as well. And often you can get much better deals doing that than going for a name brand company like Regus. I've certainly gotten a lot of good deals doing this. It does require a little poking around. It does require a little, contacting people, negotiating things. It takes a little more time and effort, but you can save a lot of money if you need a real office or a desk when you're going on your trip. And that's another thing you need to determine is, are you cool with getting an office where you share an office with 3 other people? We have 3 desks and you get 1 desk out of 3, and maybe there'll be other human beings in those other desks while you're there, and you're cool with that, or you want your own office. Obviously that costs more money. But like I said, if you hunt hard enough, you get all kinds of good deals. Here's an example of what I did with this office here, if you're watching the video version of this. Before I moved to Dubai a year or 2 ago, I had an office in this office complex, and it is owned by a family. It's a family-owned business, not some big foofy fancy company. It's a family, which means you're talking literally to the family, so you can negotiate right there with the people who actually own the property, which is nice, which is what you want. And because I am non-monogamous, I have a non-monogamous marriage, I need a place to hook up with women on the side, because one of the rules is I can't bring women over to our house unless my wife is involved somehow. So I went and got an office. It was in this, not in this building, but in this complex, where it was a double office, where I set up one room as an office and one room as kind of a mini apartment where I could meet my other ladies. And because that office was in a part of the building no one wanted and had no windows, it felt like a dungeon. Nobody wanted these offices. So I was able to negotiate a really low rate. Matter of fact, I remember it was, I think it was $408 a month for 2 full offices. Not bad, pretty good. And so when I came back here a year or 2 later for this brief, wonderful visit in the collapsing USA for a month and a half or 2.5 months, whatever, I looked around, but I said, hey, maybe I can negotiate a deal with that same company. So I went back to these guys here and I said, hi, remember me? And they said, hi, Caleb, how you doing? How's Dubai? Oh, great. I said, look, I'm going to be here for about, 80 days, month and a half. You want to work something out with me? Do you have any vacant offices? Oh yeah, we have a few vacant offices. I'll take one of them off your hand for, 2.5 months if you want. And I just worked out a little deal with them. I forget what I paid, a few $100s a month equivalent for this office. And as I mentioned in a prior video or podcast, I was actually in a different office in this building. But because I do podcasts and videos, once a day, I do all my videos once a day, usually on Thursdays, I have a very loud voice. And so the walls are kind of paper thin in this building, this building here in Vancouver, Washington. And the guy next to me complained, said, there's this guy next to me who's talking really loud. He talks for hours. I can't get my work done. So the landlords called me up the next day after I moved in and said, hey, could we move you down several offices to another vacant office we have that's much bigger and we'll charge you the same rent? I said, sure. So I moved into here and now I have this gigantic office. There's another office over there. You can't see it with the door over there. And so it's great. And this is for literally just a few $100 a month, the equivalent of that. And I just paid it all in advance. I paid it all in one hunk, $1,400, whatever. I forget what I paid. And of course, this is an office, so it's a business expense. You can write this stuff off. So always run these kind of expenses through your company. Please don't forget that. You don't want to pay for these things yourself. You want your business to pay for these kinds of things. And so that's an example of something you can negotiate when you're somewhere, especially if you're at a place, it's a regular flag for you where you're regularly going there all the time. I am now negotiating something in Paraguay where I will have some kind of office set up there where whenever I go to Paraguay, I can utilize an office space. Not bad, because in Paraguay, it's a little tricky sometimes to get an Airbnb or hotel room that has a good desk or chair. However, in another video I've done on how to set up storage units in facilities or in your flags, and this is something I'll mention here, is you can actually get a desk and a good chair, office chair. So what I've done in Paraguay, I have a storage unit down there, and one of the items I have in that storage unit is a very nice, expensive office chair. So if I have an Airbnb or hotel room that has a good desk, but the chairs suck, I'm good to go. I just hop on in there. I go to my storage unit, unload it, have a truck bring all my stuff over, unpack all my stuff, set up my office chair, and now I'm in a cool, productive office chair, and now I can get work done in my Airbnb that doesn't include any nice chairs. You could go further with this and actually get a desk. You can actually get a full suite of office furniture. Depends on how often you're there. Depends on how long you're going to stay there when you go. Paraguay, to me, is my second home, so I have no problem setting up that infrastructure down there. Obviously, if this is a place you're just going to once and you're not going to really go back there at any time in the foreseeable future, that would not be an option for you. But think about these things in terms of, am I going to return to this country? This is a country I'm going to return to over and over again. There are several countries in the world outside of Dubai, my home, where I will be returning over and over again. Paraguay, Mexico, Armenia, possibly Panama, Colombia, Vietnam, various places like this. Once the cerveza sickness is over, Hong Kong once again, various places. And so I can get infrastructure there that I need and pre-plan in ways I couldn't if I'm going somewhere where it's just a one-time visit. The next thing you have to factor in is your internet. And if you're visiting a first world country, you don't really need to worry about this. You're gonna have Wi-Fi and it'll be good. My internet in Dubai is the fastest I've ever experienced in my entire life. It's faster than anything I've ever had in the United States. It's wonderful because Dubai is at the pinnacle of the first world. However, I spend a lot of time in countries that are not in the first world, places like Paraguay, like Armenia. And so there I have to be a little creative sometimes. So I'll give you an example. The last time I was in Armenia, spent about a month in Armenia getting my residency there. I am a legal resident of the beautiful country of Armenia. And I was there for about a month. And I chose a hotel room that had a good office chair and a good desk. It was a small desk, but it was good, it was valid, all worked out. But the internet wasn't that great. And so sometimes what I would have to do is, and I figured all this out the first few days I was there, I would take my laptop and I would go around to locations adjacent to or very close to that hotel. It was in a downtown area, so it was easy to walk to. And places where I could just sit down and pop up my laptop and see how good that Wi-Fi was. Even if that meant I had to buy an item to ask for the Wi-Fi. So I did this. One of the locations, there was a little fancy, really fancy, they have this really cool, in Europe, they have these really cool little dessert shops. They don't really have in the United States. They're kind of nice. So it was one of these places right by my hotel in Armenia. And so to test the internet there as a backup in case there was a problem with the hotel internet, and there was, I'll talk about that in a second, I bought a little pastry or a little donut or something, a little tiny thing, cost me, less than $1 US. And then I said, hey, what is your Wi-Fi password? Because you can ask for the Wi-Fi password once you order something. They gave it to me, popped up, and the Wi-Fi was really strong and really good. Actually stronger and better than the one in the hotel. So I'd work in the hotel, but several times during that 1 month visit, the internet just stopped working and just wasn't working for quite a while. So instead of freaking the fuck out, which is what most people do, and yelling at the hotel and, oh, God, I gotta get my work done, I just clamped shut my laptop, walked downstairs, walked about, 40 feet down the sidewalk, walked into the little shop, popped up my laptop, and just continued working. Worked perfectly. So if you're going to places that are second world countries, certainly third world countries, you wanna make sure you have backup options for your internet. Now, certainly what you could do, and I've talked about this in other content, is get a SIM card as soon as you arrive in the country, which I think is a very good idea. Slap that SIM card into your phone, or get a dual SIM phone, or buy an international phone, a cheap one, slap that SIM card in there, make sure it's a phone with hotspot capability, make sure it works with the hotspot, that SIM card, and then you can use that SIM card as your backup too, or even as your primary. So believe it or not, here in the collapsing USA, the internet in this building that I have access to sucks. It's terrible. It works, and then it doesn't, then it works, then it doesn't. It gets slow, then it gets fast. It's a nightmare. So for most of the time I'm spending here in this office over the next several weeks, I'm actually using not one but two different hotspots in two of my phones from two different companies. Okay, two different big phone companies. I won't mention the names, but two big phone companies. And that way I have two different hotspots from two different companies, two different SIM cards. So no matter what happens, no matter where I go in the United States, and I'll be in various places in the United States during this visit. Right now I'm in Washington State, soon I'll be in Vegas, then I'll be in Orlando, Florida, doing our Orlando event, and then I'll be in some other places. But no matter where I go in the United States, no matter what is going on with cell phone coverage or whatever, I have internet. I have two phones with two different plans, two different hotspots, good to go if for some reason Wi-Fi is either not available or doesn't work well. And as I've talked about many times before, you're going to see more and more third world aspects apply to the first world, particularly the United States and Western Europe, but Canada, Australia too. You're going to see more and more third world problems encroach into Western life as Western civilization continues to collapse. I mean, they literally have diseases now in the Los Angeles areas they've never seen since the Middle Ages because of all the rats, because of all the homeless and the trash. Okay, that's an example. Infrastructure over time in the United States is going to start getting worse, not better, which is interesting because infrastructure in second world countries, most of them, is actually getting better every year. And while the United States gets worse every year, I've talked about that many times. There are many other topics that I could cover that I wasn't sure whether or not to cover on this podcast. I think I'll leave them for another time. Things like, how do you handle backing up your data when you travel for weeks and weeks? How do you manage large blocks of data if you have to upload things like videos and things like that? What if you need a printer What if you need hard copies of things? Because sometimes the 5 flag stuff, you're dealing with governments, and unfortunately governments are stupid and need physical pieces of paper. A PDF isn't enough. What do you do then? I think what I'll do is I'll save those for another podcast. But in this podcast, I want to go the basic logistics of you getting work done when you travel abroad and you're going to be there for a long, long time, particularly if it is not a Western first world country. And there's a lot of opportunities in the world outside of the Western world, so you should be spending more time outside the Western world, not less. So the more tools you have to do that, the better off you'll be, the happier you'll be, and the more money you will make. I will see you in the next podcast. Have fun. Bye.